Seriously? She's wearing that, my mother-in-law whispered loud enough for the whole front row. My daughter's hands started shaking on the violin. Then my father-in-law laughed and said, "Let's see if she even deserves applause." The principal stepped onto the stage holding a folder. And I realized he wasn't here to congratulate anyone. My name is Tessa Caldwell, and I'm 34. I'm not the kind of person who makes scenes or demands attention. I'm just a mom who shows up, works hard, and tries to do right by her kid. I work as a school administrative assistant, which isn't glamorous, but I love it. Every day I walk those halls, I feel like I belong somewhere. My daughter Lily is 9 years old, and she is the whole reason I keep going. She's sensitive and brilliant and terrified of people who look at her like she's already failed. She started violin 2 years ago, and the first time she played a full song without stopping, she looked at me like she couldn't believe her own hands. I couldn't stop crying. I grew up poor. We didn't have the right clothes or the right address or the right last name. I learned early that staying quiet was safer than speaking up. But I promised myself the moment Lily was born that she would never shrink for anyone. She would never sit in the back and wonder if she mattered. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. And that night at the recital, I was finally going to use it. If you've ever tried your hardest to be accepted by people who already decided you weren't good enough, hit that subscribe button. And if you're a parent who's had to swallow your anger just to keep the peace, oh, I see you. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with toxic in-laws. Now click hype or like, because what they did to my daughter still makes my hands shake. Lily had been practicing for 6 weeks straight. Every evening after dinner, she'd stand in the kitchen with her violin and play until her fingers left red marks on the strings. This recital was her biggest moment yet, the one where parents filled real seats in the main auditorium and teachers stood at the back with proud smiles. My husband, Daniel, insisted his parents come. Their family, he said, in that tone that meant the conversation was already over. They should support her. I didn't argue. I never argued with that tone. His parents, Richard and Gloria Whitmore, arrived dressed like they were attending a charity gala downtown. Gloria wore pearls. Richard wore a blazer with a pocket square. The air kissed the air near my cheek and looked around the auditorium the way people look at a hotel that didn't meet their standards. Gloria spotted Lily's dress, a pale yellow one I'd sewn myself, and her lip twitched. "It looks homemade," she said, not quietly. Richard smirked. "That's what happens when you don't invest in talent." I felt my chest tighten. I told myself to breathe. But then Gloria walked backstage, which she was not supposed to do, and found Lily warming up. I followed right behind her and heard it. "Maybe you should sit this one out, sweetheart. I'd hate for you to embarrass yourself." Lily's face went white. Her bow hand started trembling. I pulled Gloria out of that room so fast she stumbled on her own heels. But the damage was already sitting inside my daughter's chest. And it got worse. A teacher pulled me aside and whispered that Gloria had told 3 other parents that Lily was only performing because the school felt sorry for her. A pity spot. That's what she'd called it. Lily walked onto the stage shaky, nearly dropping her violin at the edge of the spotlight. And then, right as she began to play, Richard started clapping off beat, slow and loud, like a joke. "Well," he said to the row in front of him, "that's one way to torture a crowd." People turned. Lily froze. That's when I saw Mr. Hanley walking toward the stage holding a folder, and something in his face told me this night was about to change. The in-laws had arrived early enough to claim the front row seats reserved for performers' immediate family. I didn't even realize what they'd done until I was looking for a seat and an usher told me those spots were taken. Gloria caught my eye from the front row and gave me a tight little smile. "You don't need to be up front," she said sweetly. "Lily needs real support up here." I sat 5 rows back and stared at the back of her perfectly styled head. During the intermission, while Lily was preparing for her second piece, Gloria spotted another child in the program, a boy who played piano with the kind of stiff, trained perfection that comes from expensive lessons. "Now that's talent," Gloria announced, loud enough for half the room to hear. "That's what a future looks like." Lily was standing just behind the curtain. I saw her face through the gap in the fabric. She'd heard every word. Then Richard found Daniel near the refreshment table and I watched it happen in slow motion. Mil pulled Daniel slightly aside, her voice low and deliberate. "Your daughter is too emotional," she said. "She gets that from her." Daniel didn't say a word. He just stood there, nodding slightly like he was listening to reasonable feedback. That nod hit me harder than anything Gloria had said. I walked outside into the hallway and stood against the cool tile wall and told myself I would not cry, not here, not in front of these people. When I came back inside, Lily found me in the crowd and tugged my sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I think they hate me." I knelt down and held both her hands. "You don't have to earn love," I told her. "Not from anyone." She nodded, but her eyes were still afraid. Meanwhile, the Whitmores had found their second wind. They were laughing louder, commenting more, acting like the auditorium belonged to them. And across the room, standing very still near the side entrance, Mr. Henley was watching them. Not smiling. Just watching. Here's what the Whitmores didn't know about me. I wasn't just some quiet daughter-in-law who showed up to events and smiled through the discomfort. I worked at this school. I knew these hallways, these systems, these rules. I knew which parents had tried to bully teachers into changing grades. I knew which donors had expected their generosity to buy them a pass on behavior policies. The Whitmores were donors. Not large ones, but loud ones. They'd written a check 2 years ago and never let anyone forget it. Richard had once told a teacher, right to her face, that criticism of his family name had consequences. That teacher had filed a report. I'd helped process it. What the Whitmores didn't know was that I had been documenting their pattern for months. Not out of revenge. Out of protection. Gloria left voicemails. Long, detailed, mean voicemails about Lily's place in the program, about whether a child like her deserved solo consideration. I saved every single one. She'd sent emails to the school's arts coordinator suggesting Lily be quietly removed from the performance schedule. I had printed copies of those emails. And 3 weeks before the recital, Mr. Henley had called me into his office, closed the door, and looked at me very carefully. "If anything happens tonight," he said, "I need you to be honest with me." I told him I would be. I had a plan they never saw coming, and it was already in motion. Mr. Henley had been the principal at this school for 11 years. He wasn't flashy or loud. He was the kind of man who remembered every student's name and meant it when he asked how you were doing. He approached me quietly after Lily's first piece, while the applause was still fading. He leaned close and said, "Did they say anything to Lily?" I started to say it was fine. He stopped me with a look. "I've seen this family before," he said quietly. "They're not just rude. They're a problem." Behind the stage curtain, Mrs. Reyes, Lily's music teacher, was doing something beautiful. She'd pulled Lily into a corner, sat beside her on a folding chair, and was breathing slowly and deliberately until Lily started copying her without even realizing it. That woman loved her students the way a person loves a garden, quietly and consistently. Meanwhile, Richard had decided the intermission was a good time to perform for anyone within earshot. "Honestly, what are they teaching these kids?" he said, gesturing vaguely. "If you're going to take up a seat in a recital, you'd better have something worth hearing." Gloria chimed in that she'd already looked into other schools, better programs, places where standards actually existed. She said this while standing in the lobby of the school where I worked every day. The auditorium settled back into a hush as the second half began. I could see Mr. Hanley near the side door, and his assistant was beside him, both of them looking at something in a folder. He wasn't reading a speech. He wasn't reviewing the program. He was preparing something else entirely. Lily played her second piece with shaking hands and a straight spine. I watched every second of it. She missed one note near the middle and I saw her jaw tighten, but she didn't stop. She kept going, all the way to the final bow, and when she lifted her head the room erupted in genuine applause. Real applause. Warm and full. I was on my feet before I knew I'd stood up. Then Richard's voice cut through it like something cold. Well, at least it's over. A few people heard him. I saw their faces change. Then Mr. Hanley walked onto the stage, calm and steady, and raised one hand. The applause tapered into silence. He stepped up to the microphone and looked out at the room. Before we move on, I need to address something serious. The Whitmores sat up straighter. Gloria touched her pearls. I think they genuinely believed they were about to be thanked. Mr. Hanley opened the folder. This is an official report regarding repeated harassment of a student. The room went very still. He read slowly and without drama. He described verbal humiliation of a child. Intimidation of school staff. Interference with a scheduled school event. Documented emotional harm directed at a minor enrolled in this school. He hadn't said their names yet, and the whole room was holding its breath. Then he looked up and looked directly at the front row. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore. This report is about you. Gloria stood up. Her chair scraped back loud and ugly. How dare you, she said. Her voice was high and sharp. And I stood up too. My voice was shaking but it didn't break. Don't you dare act like victims now. Mr. Hanley laid out what I had provided. The voicemails, time-stamped and transcribed. The emails to the arts coordinator requesting Lily's removal. And a recorded message where Richard had told a teacher that crossing his family would have professional consequences. The room wasn't loud. It was something worse than loud. It was quiet with judgment. Mr. Hanley concluded by announcing that the Whitmores were banned from all school events pending a formal investigation. Daniel was sitting 3 seats down from them, and I watched something break open in his face. He stood up and looked at his parents, and his voice was low and steady and final. You humiliated my daughter, he said. You're done. Lily didn't know exactly what had happened during the announcement. She was still backstage with Mrs. Reyes. But when she came out and her teacher hugged her and her classmates crowded around her with the uncomplicated kindness that 9-year-olds sometimes manage perfectly, something changed in her face. The tightness left. She stood up straight without being told to. I crossed the room and took her hand and we walked toward the exit together. Behind us, I could hear staff politely but firmly directing the Whitmores away from the building. They tried to follow us into the lobby. They didn't make it past the door. Daniel found me in the parking lot. He didn't make excuses. He didn't explain. He just said, I should have protected you both. I'm sorry. I believed him. It wasn't the end of the work we'd have to do, but it was a beginning. The Whitmores had spent years carefully building a reputation in every room they entered. They cared more about being respected in public than about being decent in private. And that night, in the one place they valued most, that reputation was gone. The image they'd polished for so long had finally cracked in front of the very audience they'd been performing for. That night, my daughter learned she didn't have to shrink to fit into anyone's cruelty, and I learned I didn't have to stay quiet to keep the peace. If your family ever humiliated your child or tried to make them feel small in front of others, you know how deep that cuts. Subscribe to this community, because we protect our peace here. And share your story in the comments. Tell me what happened, and how you handled it. You never deserve to be shamed for loving your kid out loud. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it.